The night was cold, darker than usual, and the rain kept falling without pause. The streets were almost empty, except for a tall man walking slowly with his coat pulled tight. His name was James. He had worked a long shift at the factory, and his body was tired, but his mind was even heavier. Life had never been easy for him. People rarely noticed him, and when they did, they often looked away. James walked with his head down, listening only to the sound of his shoes splashing in the puddles. He just wanted to reach home, eat something small, and rest. But that night, something happened that would change his life forever. At the corner of an old street, under a broken streetlight, James stopped. His eyes narrowed, trying to understand what he was seeing. 3 small figures sat close together, their thin bodies shivering from the cold. They were children, 3 homeless boys, no older than 10. Their clothes were torn, their shoes full of holes, and their faces carried the look of hunger and fear. For a moment, James thought about walking past. He told himself, "You have nothing to give. You can barely feed yourself." But his feet refused to move. He kept staring at those boys. Their eyes met his, and something in his heart broke. The smallest boy, with messy hair and eyes full of tears, whispered something James could not hear. The older one tried to cover the younger two with his own jacket, which was nothing more than a piece of old cloth. The third boy kept looking at James with suspicion, ready to run if he came closer. James took a deep breath. He remembered his own childhood, lonely, without parents, moving from one foster home to another. He had known hunger. He had known the cold. And he had known the pain of being ignored. He could not ignore them. He stepped closer slowly, not wanting to frighten them. "Hey," James said softly. "What are you doing here in this weather?" The boys didn't answer. The oldest one, maybe 12, pulled the other two closer. "We don't need help," he said with a shaky voice. James looked at their small hands, their pale faces, and he knew the boy was lying. They needed help more than anyone. "I'm not here to hurt you," James continued. I can't leave you like this." The middle boy lifted his head, his lips trembling. "We're hungry." His voice was so small it almost disappeared into the rain. James felt a sharp ache in his chest. He had only a little money left in his wallet, barely enough for himself. But looking at those 3 faces, he knew what he had to do. "Come with me," James said, holding out his hand. "I'll get you something warm to eat." The oldest shook his head. "Strangers lie. People lie. You'll take us to the police, or worse." James knelt down so his eyes were level with theirs. His coat was getting wet from the puddles, but he didn't care. "Listen," he said firmly but kindly. "I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to be forgotten. But if you stay here, in this rain, you might not survive the night. Please trust me, just for tonight." The boys looked at each other. The youngest began to cry quietly, burying his face in his brother's arm. The middle boy stared at James's hand. After a long silence, he whispered, "I'm scared." James gave a small smile. "Me too. But sometimes, being scared together is better than being scared alone." That one sentence seemed to touch them. Slowly, the middle boy stood up. Then the youngest followed. Finally, after another moment, the oldest boy sighed and helped his brothers up. They didn't take James's hand, but they walked beside him, still unsure, still afraid. The rain fell harder as they moved down the street. James kept glancing at them, making sure they were close. He felt a strange warmth inside, a feeling he hadn't known in years. It was as if fate had placed him on that street at that exact moment for a reason. When they reached a small diner still open, James pushed the door gently. The warm air and smell of food rushed out, making the boys' eyes widen. They hesitated at the entrance, afraid the owner would throw them out. But James motioned them inside. "Don't worry," he said. "You're with me." They sat at the corner table, nervous and quiet. James ordered soup, bread, and hot chocolate for each of them. When the food arrived, the boys attacked it like they hadn't eaten in days. James watched them, his throat tightening. He remembered nights when he had eaten from trash bins, and he swore he would never let these boys suffer the same fate. After the meal, the youngest finally spoke, his voice soft but full of gratitude. "Thank you, sir." James nodded, fighting back emotions. "My name's James," he said. "And you don't need to call me sir." The oldest boy finally looked him in the eye. "Why are you helping us?" James paused, then answered honestly. "Because once, no one helped me. And I promised myself, if I ever had the chance, I wouldn't let another child go through what I did." The boys didn't reply, but something in their eyes shifted. Suspicion was still there, but a small spark of trust had begun to grow. That night, James made a choice he didn't fully understand. He wasn't just giving them food. He wasn't just giving them shelter. He was about to give them a piece of his life, maybe all of it. And in return, though he didn't know it yet, those 3 boys would one day give him something greater, something that would change his fate forever. The next morning, the sky was still gray, and the streets were damp from the night's endless rain. James woke up earlier than usual. He had not slept well. His small apartment, with its thin walls and broken heater, was already cramped for one man. But now, there were 3 extra bodies inside, 3 boys sleeping on the old couch and floor. James stood near the window, staring at them quietly. Their faces looked different in the daylight. Without the shadows of the night, he could see how young they really were. The youngest clutched an old blanket James had given him, his lips parted in the soft breathing of deep sleep. The middle boy slept curled up like he was still trying to protect himself. The oldest, even in sleep, kept one arm stretched toward his brothers, as if guarding them. James sighed. "What have I done?" he thought. His paycheck was already too small. Rent, food, electricity, everything took more than he had. Taking in 3 boys was not something he had planned. It was madness. Yet when he looked at their faces, something inside him whispered, "You can't turn back now." When the boys finally woke up, their first reaction was fear. The oldest sat up quickly, his eyes scanning the room. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice sharp. "In my home," James answered calmly. "Don't worry. You're safe here." The middle boy rubbed his eyes, still half asleep. The youngest clung to his brother's arm. They didn't trust James yet, but hunger made them stay quiet. James made breakfast, just eggs and bread, the only food he had left. He placed the plates on the small table. "Eat," he said simply. The boys looked at each other. Finally, the middle one picked up a piece of bread, then the other 2 followed. They ate slowly, as if afraid it might be taken away. James sat across from them, watching silently. After a while, the youngest spoke. "Why are you helping us?" James gave a tired smile. "Because I know what it feels like to be alone. And no child should feel that way." The oldest still didn't believe him. He narrowed his eyes. "You don't even know us. We could be trouble." James leaned forward. "Maybe. But trouble or not, you're still children. And children deserve a chance." The oldest didn't reply, but his jaw tightened. Something about James's voice seemed different from the others they had met on the streets. That day marked the beginning of a hard journey. James had to stretch every dollar. He worked extra shifts at the factory, sometimes coming home with his hands bleeding from the machines. But no matter how tired he was, he always brought something back for the boys: milk, bread, sometimes a small treat if he could afford it. The boys, at first, stayed distant. They whispered to each other when James wasn't listening. They were ready to run at any moment. They had lived too long on the streets to trust anyone easily. But little by little, small cracks appeared in their walls. One evening, James came home late, soaked in sweat and dirt from work. He found the youngest waiting by the door, holding a glass of water in his tiny hands. "For you," the boy said shyly. James froze, his throat tight. He took the glass with shaking fingers. "Thank you," he whispered. It was the first sign of trust, small but powerful. Another night, the middle boy sat with James while he fixed a broken chair. "Can I help?" he asked softly. James handed him a hammer, guiding his small hands. The boy's eyes lit up with pride when the chair stood steady again. The oldest, however, was the hardest. He carried the weight of responsibility for his brothers and refused to let go of his suspicion. One night, James overheard him whispering, "If he tries anything, we run." James didn't get angry. Instead, he walked into the room and said, "You're smart to protect your brothers. But protecting them doesn't always mean running. Sometimes, it means staying in the right place." The boy said nothing, but the words stayed with him. Days turned into weeks. James made sure the boys bathed, wore clean clothes, and had meals every day. He found second-hand jackets for them when the cold got worse. He even spoke to a nearby school about enrolling them. The first time the boys walked into a classroom, their eyes were wide with both fear and wonder. They had never sat at real desks, never written in real notebooks. James stood outside the classroom door, watching through the glass. His chest swelled with pride, but also with fear. Could he really carry this responsibility? Could he really be enough for them? At night, when the boys were asleep, James often sat at the table with bills spread in front of him. His face was tired, his heart heavy. There were moments he almost gave up. Maybe I should call social services, he thought. Maybe they'd be better off. But then, he would hear the soft breathing of the boys in the other room, and he knew the truth. No one else would love them like he did. No one else would fight for them like he was willing to. It was not just about food or shelter anymore. It was about something deeper, something he had missed his whole life. Family. One rainy evening, as thunder shook the small apartment, the youngest crawled into James's bed. His tiny voice whispered, "Good night, Dad." James froze. The word hit him like lightning. Dad. He had never been called that before. He lay awake long after the boy fell asleep beside him, tears sliding down his face. The next morning, nothing looked different on the outside. The world was still hard, money was still short, and the future was still uncertain. But inside, something had changed forever. James was no longer just a man helping three strangers. He was becoming their father. And whether he was ready or not, his life had taken a path that could never be reversed. The years that followed were not easy, but they were full of change. The three boys, Daniel, Michael, and Aaron, were no longer the scared faces James had found under the broken streetlight. They were now schoolchildren with books in their hands, laughter in their voices, and dreams in their eyes. James never forgot how hard it was to get them into school. At first, the principal refused. "They have no documents, no family records," she said firmly. But James didn't walk away. He worked day after day, filling forms, speaking to officials, and proving that he would take responsibility. In the end, his persistence broke the wall. The boys were given a chance to sit in classrooms like any other children. The first day of school was unforgettable. Daniel, the oldest, stood tall, pretending he wasn't nervous, but James saw his fists clenched tightly. Michael, the middle one, looked around with wide, curious eyes. Aaron, the youngest, clung to James's hand and whispered, "Don't leave us." James knelt down and smiled. "I'll be right here when you come out. Go learn. Go shine." From that day on, the apartment felt different. Every evening, the boys came home with stories. Daniel would complain about bullies or homework but secretly enjoyed the challenge. Michael loved drawing shapes and writing neatly in his notebook. Aaron, though the smallest, surprised James with how quickly he picked up words and numbers. But school also brought problems. Other children made fun of their worn-out clothes and old shoes. Some whispered, calling them street kids. Once, Daniel came home with a bruise on his cheek. James's heart burned with anger. "Who did this to you?" he asked. Daniel looked down. "Doesn't matter. I can handle it." James shook his head. "Handling it doesn't mean fighting. Handling it means proving them wrong by becoming better than what they say you are." Daniel didn't answer, but those words stayed with him. To keep them in school, James worked harder than ever. He took night shifts, lifted heavy loads, and sometimes skipped meals so the boys could eat properly. His hands grew rough, his back ached, but he never complained. Each time he saw the boys studying under the dim light of the old lamp, his pain felt smaller. Slowly, their talents began to shine. Daniel was strong and fast. At sports day, he ran like the wind, leaving everyone behind. The crowd cheered his name, and for the first time, he felt proud of himself. After the race, he saw James clapping with tears in his eyes. Michael found his gift in art. He could turn a blank page into something alive with just a pencil. His teachers often kept his drawings on the wall. James once came home to see Michael sketching his portrait, his tired eyes, his bent shoulders, and his gentle smile. James stared at it for a long time, speechless. Aaron, the youngest, surprised everyone with his sharp mind. He loved books, numbers, and solving puzzles. Teachers said he had the brain of a future scientist or doctor. He would often read aloud to his brothers at night, his soft voice filling the room while James listened quietly from the kitchen. But life wasn't perfect. Money was always short. Sometimes, James came home late to find the boys waiting with worried faces. Sometimes, he had nothing more than bread to give them for dinner. Yet even on those nights, they sat together, laughing and sharing stories, making the darkness feel less heavy. One evening, when James was too tired to even sit up, Daniel placed a blanket over him. "You've done enough today," he whispered. Michael quietly put away the dishes. Aaron read softly by the bedside until James fell asleep. The bond was no longer one of strangers. It was family. Still, challenges grew as the boys entered their teenage years. Daniel's temper often got him into trouble. He hated seeing anyone insult his brothers. Michael sometimes felt lost, wondering if art could ever give him a future. Aaron worried too much, afraid of failing James after all his sacrifices. James saw their struggles. One night, he called them together. They sat on the old couch, their faces lit by the warm glow of the lamp. "I know it's hard," James said, his voice steady. "I know you feel different from the others. But listen to me, being different is not a curse. It's a strength. The world tried to break you before you even had a chance to grow. But you're still here. You're stronger than most kids will ever be." The boys listened quietly. Daniel clenched his fists, Michael looked down, and Aaron leaned against James's shoulder. "Whatever you choose in life," James continued, "do it with all your heart. And remember, you are not alone anymore. You have each other. You have me." It was a simple speech, but it sank deep into their hearts. The following years were filled with small victories. Daniel joined the school's sports team and won medals. Michael's drawings won competitions. Aaron earned top grades, surprising even his teachers. Each achievement lit up James's tired face with pride. But in the shadows of these joys, a question quietly waited: how long could James keep pushing his body, working endless shifts, and carrying the weight of 4 lives on his shoulders? No one knew the answer. Not James. Not the boys. Yet for now, they lived in the warmth of their little home, their laughter echoing against the cracked walls, their dreams burning bright despite the hardships. And as the years passed, one truth became clear: what had started as an act of mercy on a cold, rainy night was turning into something unbreakable. A family built not by blood, but by sacrifice, love, and destiny. Teenage years arrived like a storm. What once had been simple laughter in James's small apartment now became louder arguments, slammed doors, and heavy silence. Raising 3 boys was never going to be easy, but raising 3 teenagers with scars of the streets was like walking on glass every day. Daniel, the oldest, grew restless. His body was strong now, his shoulders broad, his eyes sharp with anger. At school, he was admired for his speed and strength, but outside, he began to notice other boys, gang kids with shiny shoes, easy money, and cars. They whispered to him, tempting him with a life that looked faster and easier than the one James worked so hard for. One evening, Daniel came home with bruised knuckles. James saw them immediately. "What happened?" he asked. "Nothing," Daniel muttered, avoiding his eyes. "Don't lie to me." Daniel slammed his fist against the wall. "Why do you care? You're not even my real dad." The words sliced through James like a knife. The room went quiet. Michael lowered his sketchbook, and Aaron froze with his book in his lap. For a moment, James felt his chest tighten. He could have shouted back, but instead, he took a deep breath. "I care," James said softly, his voice trembling with hurt but also strength, "because I chose to be your father. Blood didn't bring us together, love did. Don't ever forget that." Daniel's face hardened, but his eyes gave him away. He turned and stormed into his room, slamming the door. Michael, the middle boy, faced his own struggle. He had talent in art, but he felt invisible compared to Daniel's medals and Aaron's grades. Teachers praised his drawings, but what good was art in a world that demanded survival? Sometimes he sat for hours, staring at a blank page, asking himself if he even mattered. One afternoon, James found him tearing one of his sketches into pieces. "Michael, why?" Michael's voice cracked. "Because it's useless. No one cares about pictures. Daniel's the strong one, Aaron's the smart one, what am I? Nothing." James gathered the torn pieces from the floor, his hands gentle. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Strength can fade. Knowledge can fail. But art? Art touches the soul. Your gift is not small, it's powerful. Don't you ever call yourself nothing." Tears welled in Michael's eyes, but he looked away, ashamed to show them. James placed the pieces back into his hands. "One day, the world will see what I see in you." Aaron, the youngest, faced pressure of a different kind. His sharp mind made him top of the class, but it also brought jealousy. Older students mocked him, called him names, and sometimes shoved him around. He never told James, afraid of worrying him. Instead, Aaron buried himself in books, studying until late at night. But the weight grew heavy. One night, James found him asleep at the table, his face pressed against open textbooks, tears dried on his cheeks. James touched his shoulder gently. "Aaron, you don't have to carry the world alone," he whispered. "I'm here. We're all here." Life inside the small apartment was full of love, but also full of battles. Some nights ended with laughter, others with shouting. James worried constantly, were they slipping away from him? Had he done enough? The turning point came one weekend when Daniel disappeared. He didn't come home Friday night. Michael and Aaron were anxious, pacing the floor. James tried to stay calm, but his heart raced with fear. By midnight, he put on his coat and went out searching. He found Daniel near the corner store, standing with the same gang kids James had warned him about. They were laughing, smoking, and showing off stolen money. James's anger and fear collided. He walked straight to Daniel, grabbed his arm, and pulled him aside. "What are you doing here?" James demanded. Daniel yanked his arm away. "I'm tired of being poor. I'm tired of watching you break your back for nothing. Look at them, they don't work half as hard, and they have everything." James's voice rose, stronger than Daniel had ever heard. "Everything? That's not everything. That's nothing but chains. Those boys don't care about you, they'll use you and throw you away. I've given my life to keep you safe, and you'd throw it away for pocket change?" Daniel's face twisted with anger, but beneath it, guilt was visible. The gang boys laughed, but James didn't care. He stepped closer, his eyes burning. "Listen to me, Daniel. You can hate me, you can shout at me, you can even walk away from me, but I will never let you destroy yourself. I'd rather break my own bones than watch you break your life." The street went silent. Even the gang boys shifted uncomfortably under James's fierce words. Daniel's jaw tightened, but his eyes grew wet. Without another word, he turned and walked away with James. Back at home, Daniel locked himself in his room. Hours later, James heard quiet sobbing through the thin walls. He didn't enter. He just leaned his back against the door and whispered, "I'm here, son. Whenever you're ready, I'm here." The struggles didn't end that night. There were still arguments, doubts, and temptations. But something had shifted. The boys had seen how far James would go for them, not with fists, but with love stronger than anger. Still, James knew danger was never far. The world outside their door was cruel, ready to pull them back into darkness. He lay awake many nights, staring at the ceiling, praying silently. Will they stay on the path I fought for? Or will I lose them to the streets that once almost took them? That question hung heavy in his heart, unanswered, as the future loomed ahead. The years of storms slowly began to calm. The boys were no longer the fragile children James had first found, nor the angry teenagers who slammed doors and shouted words that cut deep. They were growing into young men, each carrying the marks of their past, but also the strength James had planted in them. Daniel, the oldest, was the first to change. The night James pulled him away from the gang kids never left his mind. He could still hear James's words echoing, "I will never let you destroy yourself." At first, those words had filled him with anger, but as days passed, he realized they were born from love. One afternoon at school, the coach pulled Daniel aside. "You've got speed, boy. Real speed. If you train harder, you could win state championships. Maybe even a scholarship." For the first time, Daniel saw a different future, not one of gangs or quick money, but of stadiums, medals, and pride. That evening, he told James, "Coach thinks I could be something." James smiled, his tired eyes brightening. "I already know you're something. Now the world will see it too." Michael, the middle one, also found his path. His art teacher encouraged him to enter a citywide competition. "Your drawings tell stories," she said. "Don't hide your gift." Michael hesitated at first, afraid of failure. But one night, James sat beside him while he sketched. "Son," James said gently, "every line you draw carries a piece of your heart. Don't be afraid to show the world your heart." Michael submitted his work. Weeks later, his drawing of a man shielding 3 children from a storm won first prize. The picture was displayed in the city gallery, and people stood quietly in front of it, some with tears in their eyes. When James saw it, his chest swelled with a pride so strong it brought him to tears. Aaron, the youngest, was already excelling in school. Teachers said he could win scholarships, maybe even study medicine one day. He spent long hours buried in books, his mind racing ahead of his years. But more than knowledge, Aaron had compassion. He often helped his classmates with studies, never asking for anything in return. James once overheard a teacher telling another, "That boy has the mind of a doctor and the heart of a healer." The 3 boys, each walking different paths, shared one thing in common: the man who had raised them. But James's sacrifices were taking a toll. His hair had turned gray too early, his back bent from years of hard labor. He came home more tired than before, coughing into his hands when he thought no one was watching. The boys noticed. One night, Daniel returned from practice and found James asleep at the table, his arms resting on unpaid bills. Daniel looked at Michael and Aaron. For the first time, he said in a firm voice, "We have to do something for him. We can't let him carry us forever." From that day, the boys began to work together in secret. Daniel trained harder than ever, determined to win a scholarship. Michael spent hours perfecting his art, hoping it would bring recognition. Aaron pushed himself in studies, aiming for the top so James wouldn't have to worry about tuition. They stopped arguing with each other and started supporting one another. When Daniel was tired, Michael massaged his sore legs. When Michael doubted himself, Aaron encouraged him with words James once used. When Aaron studied late, Daniel stayed awake to keep him company. The house that once echoed with fights now echoed with determination. The moment of change came on James's birthday. He had forgotten it himself, birthdays never meant much to him. But that evening, when he walked through the door, the lights flicked on. "Surprise!" the boys shouted together. The small apartment was decorated with handmade banners. A simple cake sat on the table, the words written in uneven icing, "Happy birthday, Dad." James froze. His eyes watered instantly. He had never celebrated a birthday like this. He looked at the 3 young men standing proudly before him, their faces glowing with love. Michael handed him an envelope. "Open it." Inside were 3 letters, one from each boy. Daniel's letter promised he would win his scholarship and dedicate it to James. Michael's letter said he would never stop drawing until the whole world saw the man who saved their lives. Aaron's letter said he would become a doctor one day, not for money, but to honor the man who healed their hearts. James's hands trembled as he read. Tears streamed down his face. "You boys, you have no idea what this means to me." Aaron stepped forward, hugging him tightly. "We know, Dad. And now it's our turn to carry you." The room filled with emotion, a moment so powerful it etched itself deep into their souls. For James, it was proof that his years of sacrifice had not been in vain. For the boys, it was the moment they realized how much their father had given up for them. But behind James's smile, a shadow lingered. His body was failing him faster than he admitted. The cough that he tried to hide grew worse. Sometimes, he felt dizzy at work. Sometimes, he woke at night with pain in his chest. He kept it from the boys, not wanting to spoil their happiness. He told himself, "They are strong now. They can stand without me." But deep down, he feared the truth, his time with them might be shorter than he wanted. And as the boys prepared for their bright futures, they had no idea that soon, their greatest test was yet to come. The years of hard work finally caught up with James. He had spent too many nights in the factory, too many mornings pushing his tired body beyond its limits. Now, even small tasks left him breathless. His cough grew sharper, his hands weaker. But he told no one. He didn't want the boys, his sons, to worry. They were just beginning their own journeys. Daniel was on his way to sports championships, Michael was displaying his art in galleries, and Aaron was winning awards in science competitions. James wanted nothing to distract them. But sons notice what fathers hide. One evening, after practice, Daniel came home early. He found James sitting at the kitchen table, coughing hard, his hand covering his mouth. When James moved his hand away, Daniel's eyes widened, there were spots of blood. "Dad!" Daniel's voice broke with fear. James froze. For a moment, he thought of lying, but the look in Daniel's eyes made it impossible. He sighed deeply. "It's nothing, son. Just age catching up with me." But it wasn't nothing. The truth came soon after. James's lungs were weak, damaged from years of factory dust and strain. The doctor's words were careful but heavy, "He needs rest. He cannot keep working. If he does, he won't have much time left." When the boys heard, they were shaken to the core. The man who had carried them, fought for them, and given them everything was now fragile. Michael broke down in tears. "We can't lose him." Aaron clenched his fists, his voice trembling. "No. We won't. Not after everything he's done for us." That night, the three brothers sat together, their faces lit by the same dim lamp that had watched them grow. Daniel looked at the others. "It's our turn now. He gave us his life. We're going to give him back his future." From that moment, the roles began to change. Daniel pushed himself harder, winning competitions until he secured a full scholarship. He no longer saw victory as his own, it was for James. He wanted his father to sit in a stadium one day, proud and smiling. Michael sold his first painting at a gallery, using the money to buy medicine and healthy food for James. He often sat by his father's side, sketching him quietly, as if trying to capture every moment before it slipped away. Aaron worked endlessly, winning a place in a top program. He spent nights researching treatments, reading about lungs and health, determined to one day become the doctor who could heal men like his father. But beyond success, they gave James something deeper. They gave him love in return. On cold mornings, Daniel made breakfast before practice, telling James to stay in bed. Michael filled the apartment with drawings of sunlight and laughter to keep the shadows away. Aaron sat by James's bed, reading aloud like he used to when he was a child. James, though weak, felt a warmth stronger than any medicine. He realized the truth, he had once saved 3 boys, but now, they were saving him. One evening, they brought him to a new house. Not the cramped apartment with broken walls, but a warm, bright home with space for all of them. "What is this?" James asked, his voice shaking. Daniel grinned. "Our gift to you, Dad. No more broken heaters, no more leaking roofs. You gave us a home when we had nothing. Now we give you one in return. Tears streamed down James's face. He looked at his sons, no longer lost children, but strong men. His heart swelled with pride. "You boys, you are my life's greatest work." The days that followed were the happiest James had ever known. He no longer walked alone in the rain. He no longer worried about being forgotten. Every moment, his sons stood by his side, carrying the weight he once carried alone. But fate had one final gift. At a grand event years later, Daniel stood on the stage, a gold medal around his neck. He raised it high and said to the cheering crowd, "This is for my father, the man who taught me strength." In another hall, Michael unveiled a painting so powerful it left the audience silent. It showed a tall man shielding three small boys under a storm, his face weary but full of love. Michael's voice shook as he said, "This is my father, the man who gave us light." And in a white coat, Aaron walked across the stage as a doctor, his degree in his hands. His speech was simple: "I dedicate my life to the man who healed me before I even knew I was broken." James, sitting in the front row, watched with tears streaming down his face. He could hardly believe the destiny that had unfolded before him. 25 years ago, he had stopped on a cold, rainy night, guided only by the ache in his heart. He had taken in 3 homeless boys, unsure if he could even feed them. And now, those same boys had changed his fate forever. They were not just his sons. They were his legacy. As James held their hands that night, weak but full of peace, he whispered the words he had carried for years. "I thought I saved you. But the truth is, you saved me." And in that moment, fate came full circle.